Emma Crawford's hands were raw from scrubbing floors, her back ached from bending over washtubs, and her eyes burned from lack of sleep. She'd been working 3 jobs for the past 6 months, ever since her father died, and left her with nothing but debts and a broken-down boarding house in Silver Creek, Montana. At 23, she should have been married by now, should have had a family of her own. But no man in town wanted a woman with nothing to her name. A woman who smelled of lye soap and wore the same faded dress day after day. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand and looked out the window of Mrs. Henderson's kitchen. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Somewhere out there, people were sitting down to dinner with their families, laughing and talking about their day. Emma couldn't remember the last time she'd had a hot meal she hadn't cooked for someone else. "Emma, dear, you look exhausted," Mrs. Henderson said, coming into the kitchen with an armful of linens. "Why don't you take tomorrow off?" Emma shook her head. "I can't afford to, Mom. I'm already behind on the rent." Mrs. Henderson sighed. "That landlord of yours is a cruel man, raising your rent when he knows you're struggling." Emma didn't answer. What was there to say? Mr. Peterson owned half the buildings in Silver Creek, and he knew she had nowhere else to go. She finished her work just after midnight and walked home through the quiet streets. The boarding house was dark and cold. She couldn't afford to keep a fire going when she wasn't there, and she was hardly ever there. She fell into bed without even removing her dress, too tired to care. The next morning, she was back at work before dawn, this time at the bakery. Her fingers moved automatically, kneading dough, shaping loaves, all while her mind drifted to thoughts of escape. Maybe she could save enough money to move to California, start fresh somewhere no one knew her. Emma, she looked up to find Mr. Hanson, the baker, standing in front of her with a concerned expression. "There's a man here to see you," he said. "Says it's important." Emma's heart sank. Had Mr. Peterson sent someone to collect the rent early? She wiped her flour-covered hands on her apron and stepped into the front of the shop. The man waiting for her was unlike anyone she'd ever seen. He stood well over 6 feet tall, with shoulders so broad he seemed to fill the entire doorway. His dark hair was slightly too long, touching the collar of his wool coat, and his face was weathered from years in the sun. But it was his eyes that caught her attention, deep brown, almost black, with a sadness in them that made her breath catch. "Miss Crawford?" His voice was low and rough, like he didn't use it often. "Yes? My name is James Thornton. I own a farm about 20 miles north of here. I've come to make you a proposal." Emma's cheeks flushed. "I don't know what you've heard about me, Mr. Thornton, but I'm looking for a wife," he said bluntly. "A marriage of convenience. I need someone to help with my house and my daughter. You need security. I've been watching you work these past few weeks, and you're the hardest working woman I've ever seen." Emma stared at him, speechless. Marriage to a complete stranger. "I know this is sudden," he continued, his eyes never leaving hers, "but I'm a man of my word. You'd have your own room, your own space. I wouldn't force anything on you. You'd be free to leave if you weren't happy. But I'd take care of you, pay off your debts, give you a home." "Why me?" Emma finally managed to ask. "There are prettier women in town. Women with dowries." "I don't want pretty," James said quietly. "I want someone real, someone who knows what it means to work hard, to struggle. Someone who won't run at the first sign of difficulty." Emma looked down at her flour-covered hands, at the burns and calluses that marked years of labor. No one had ever looked at her work as anything but a sign of her poverty. But this man, this stranger, saw it as strength. "I have a daughter," James continued. "She's 4 years old. Her mother died 2 years ago, and I don't know how to raise a little girl on my own. She needs a woman's touch, someone kind." Emma's heart twisted. A motherless child. She knew what that felt like. "I need to think about it," she said. James nodded. "I'll be at the hotel until tomorrow evening. If you decide yes, come find me. If not, I'll understand." He turned to leave, then paused. "Miss Crawford, whatever you decide, I've already paid off your debt to Mr. Peterson. You don't have to worry about that anymore." Before Emma could respond, he was gone. She stood in the bakery, trembling, her mind racing. He'd paid her debt. A man she'd never met had just freed her from the burden that had been crushing her for months. That evening, instead of going to her 3rd job, Emma sat in her cold boarding house and tried to think clearly. Marriage to a stranger, moving to an isolated farm, becoming a mother to a child she'd never met. It was insane. But what was her alternative? Continue working herself to death? Wait for some other man to, maybe someday, see past her poverty and want her? She thought about James Thornton's eyes. The sadness in them, the way he'd looked at her like she was something valuable, not just a pair of hands to scrub his floors. And the little girl, a 4-year-old without a mother. Emma made her decision. The next evening, she walked to the hotel with her few belongings in a small bag. James was standing outside, looking out at the mountains. When he saw her, something flickered in his eyes. Relief, maybe, or hope. "I'll marry you," Emma said, "but I have conditions. Name them. I want to meet your daughter before we make it legal. If she doesn't like me or if I feel I can't care for her properly, I want the freedom to leave." James nodded. "Fair enough. Anything else?" "I want your word that you'll never raise a hand to me or her. And I want books. If I'm going to be stuck on a farm, I want books to read." A small smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. It transformed his face, making him look younger, less weary. "I have a whole library. My late wife, loved to read." They were married by the Justice of the Peace the next morning. Emma wore her best dress, which still looked shabby next to James's clean shirt and jacket. He placed a simple gold band on her finger, and she noticed his hand was shaking. The ride to his farm took most of the day. They sat in his wagon side by side, not speaking much. Emma studied him from the corner of her eye, the strong line of his jaw, the way his hands held the reins with easy confidence. He was handsome, she realized, in a rough, unpolished way. "Tell me about your daughter," she said finally. James's expression softened. "Her name is Sarah. She's small for her age, quiet. She hasn't spoken much since her mother died. The housekeeper I hired says she's difficult, but I think she's just sad." "What was your wife like?" James was quiet for a long moment. "Beautiful, delicate. She wasn't meant for this life. The isolation, the hard work, it wore her down. She died giving birth to our second child. The baby didn't survive either." Emma heard the pain in his voice and didn't press further. The farm appeared as the sun was setting. It was larger than Emma had expected. A solid 2-story house, a big barn, fields stretching out in every direction. Cattle grazed in the distance and chickens pecked in the yard. "It's beautiful," Emma breathed. James looked at her in surprise. "Most women think it's too remote. I've lived in town my whole life, surrounded by people who look down on me. This looks like freedom." Something warm flickered in James's eyes. He helped her down from the wagon, his large hands spanning her waist. For a moment, they stood close, and Emma caught the scent of leather and pine. Her heart did an unexpected flutter. The front door opened, and a small figure appeared. Sarah Thornton had her father's dark eyes and a tangle of brown curls. She wore a dress that was clean but wrinkled, and she clutched a rag doll to her chest. "Sarah, this is Emma," James said gently. "She's going to be staying with us." The little girl stared at Emma with solemn eyes. Emma crouched down to her level. "Hello, Sarah, I like your doll. What's her name?" Sarah didn't answer, just held the doll tighter. "It's all right if you don't want to talk to me yet," Emma said softly. "I'm a stranger, and strangers can be scary, but I hope we'll be friends." She stood up and followed James into the house. The interior was neat, but clearly lacked a woman's touch. The furniture was practical, the floors clean, but unpolished. In the parlor, Emma noticed shelves lined with books. "Your room is upstairs," James said. "First door on the right. Mine is at the end of the hall. Sarah's is across from yours." He showed her a comfortable bedroom with a large bed, a wardrobe, and a window overlooking the fields. It was the nicest room Emma had ever had. "Thank you," she said. James nodded and left her alone. Emma sat on the bed and tried to process everything that had happened. 2 days ago, she'd been scrubbing floors. Now she was married and living on a farm with a grieving widower and his silent daughter. The next morning, Emma woke before dawn. Old habits died hard. She dressed and went downstairs to find James already in the kitchen, trying to make breakfast while Sarah sat at the table, looking miserable. "Let me," Emma said, taking the pan from him. Their fingers brushed, and she felt that flutter again. James stepped back, watching as she quickly prepared eggs and bacon. "You don't have to do this. I hired a housekeeper. I like cooking. It's different when it's for people you—" She paused. "When it's for your own family." She saw something cross his face at the word family. Breakfast was quiet. Sarah picked at her food, while James and Emma exchanged awkward glances. After the meal, James headed out to work the farm, and Emma was left alone with the little girl. "Would you like to help me explore the house?" Emma asked. Sarah shook her head. That's all right. I'll just wander around myself. You can join me if you change your mind. Emma spent the morning cleaning and organizing, making mental notes of what needed to be done. The house was well built but neglected in small ways. Curtains that needed mending, windows that needed washing, corners that hadn't been properly dusted in months. She was washing dishes when she felt a small presence behind her. Sarah had crept into the kitchen and was watching her. "Would you like to help?" Emma asked, not turning around. Slowly, Sarah nodded. Emma dried her hands and lifted the little girl onto a stool. She showed her how to dry the dishes, praising her when she did it right. Sarah didn't smile, but Emma caught a glimmer of interest in her eyes. That evening, after James came in from the fields, Emma had dinner ready. The table was set properly, the food was hot, and she'd even managed to bake bread. James stared at the spread. This is wonderful. It's just dinner," Emma said, but she felt pleased. They ate together, Sarah sitting between them. The little girl was still mostly silent, but Emma noticed she kept glancing at her new stepmother with curious eyes. After Sarah was in bed, Emma and James sat in the parlor. The fire crackled in the hearth and the silence between them was less awkward than before. "Thank you," James said finally, "for being kind to her. The housekeeper I had before, she wasn't mean, but she wasn't warm either. She's a sweet child. She's just hurting." James looked at the fire. "I don't know how to help her. I don't know how to talk to her about her mother. I'm better with horses and cattle than I am with little girls." Emma studied his profile, the strong bones of his face, the worry lines around his eyes. "You're doing better than you think. She adores you. I can see it in the way she looks at you. She needs more than I can give her. She needs love. And time and patience. We'll figure it out together." James turned to look at her, and the intensity in his gaze made Emma's breath catch. "Why did you really agree to this?" he asked quietly. "You could have found another way out of your debts." Emma considered lying, giving him some practical answer. But something about the way he looked at her, like he genuinely wanted to understand, made her tell the truth. "Because I'm tired of being alone," she said. "I'm tired of working myself to death and having nothing to show for it. I'm tired of being invisible. When you looked at me in that bakery, you saw me, not just another pair of hands, but a person. No one's looked at me like that in years." James was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I see you, Emma. I've been watching you for weeks, before I worked up the courage to approach you. The way you never complained, never asked for help, just kept going. You're the strongest person I know." Emma felt tears prick her eyes. "I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about not being tired. It's about keeping going even when you are." He reached out and took her hand. His palm was rough and calloused, but his touch was gentle. Emma looked down at their joined hands, his so large it engulfed hers completely. "I know this isn't a real marriage," James said. "I know I promised you your own space, but I want you to know I'm glad you're here. This house already feels different, better." Emma's heart was pounding. "I'm glad I'm here too." They sat like that for a while, holding hands in the firelight, neither wanting to break the moment. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm. Emma threw herself into making the house a home, and slowly, Sarah began to respond to her. The little girl started following Emma around, helping with small tasks, occasionally offering a shy smile. Emma discovered that the farm had been neglected in more ways than one. The vegetable garden was overgrown with weeds, the chicken coop needed repairs, and the house desperately needed a woman's attention. But rather than feeling overwhelmed, Emma felt energized. For the first time in her life, she was working for herself, for her own home. She spent her mornings with Sarah, teaching the little girl to help in the kitchen. They baked bread together, their hands white with flour, as Emma showed her how to knead the dough. Sarah's eyes would light up when the bread came out of the oven, golden and perfect. "We made that, Mama Emma?" Sarah asked one morning, her voice still soft and uncertain. Emma's heart swelled at the name. "We did, sweetheart. You're becoming a wonderful little baker." In the afternoons, while Sarah napped, Emma tackled the garden. She pulled weeds, turned soil, and planted seeds she'd found in the shed. The physical labor reminded her of her old life, but this was different. Every drop of sweat, every aching muscle was building something that belonged to her. James would come in from the fields and find her there, dirt under her fingernails, hair escaping from her bun, cheeks flushed from the sun, and the way he looked at her in those moments made Emma's pulse quicken. "You don't have to work so hard," he'd say, but there was admiration in his eyes. "I want to," Emma would reply. "This is my home now." One evening, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Emma was hanging laundry when she heard hoofbeats. A wagon approached, driven by a stern-looking woman in a black dress. She pulled up to the house and climbed down without waiting for an invitation. "So, you're the new Mrs. Thornton," the woman said, looking Emma up and down with clear disapproval. "I'm Mrs. Abigail Fletcher. I live on the neighboring farm." Emma wiped her hands on her apron. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Fletcher. I'll be frank with you, girl. This farm has been without a proper mistress for 2 years. Poor Mr. Thornton has struggled terribly. That child of his barely speaks. The whole situation has been quite scandalous." Emma felt her spine stiffen. Sarah is a sweet child who's grieving her mother. "Well, we'll see how long you last. The last woman James brought here, his first wife, she couldn't handle the isolation. Delicate thing she was. City-bred. Are you city-bred?" "I'm from Silver Creek," Emma said evenly. "And I'm not delicate." Mrs. Fletcher's eyes narrowed. "We'll see. The winters here are brutal. Many a woman has fled screaming come February." After the woman left, Emma stood in the yard, trembling with anger and something else, determination. She wouldn't be another woman who failed James. She wouldn't abandon Sarah. That night, she asked James about his first wife. They were sitting in the parlor again, the fire casting dancing shadows on the walls. James had been quiet all evening, and Emma sensed he was troubled. "Mrs. Fletcher came by today," Emma said softly. James's jaw tightened. "What did she say?" "She told me about your first wife, about how she couldn't handle the isolation." James was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with old pain. "Catherine was beautiful, refined, educated. I met her in Denver when I went to sell cattle. I was young and stupid, thought I could give her everything she wanted." He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark fields. "But she hated it here, hated the wind, the cold, the endless sky. She missed parties and theaters and people. I tried to make her happy, but nothing I did was enough." Emma went to stand beside him. "James, when she got pregnant with Sarah, I thought maybe a baby would give her purpose, make her feel less alone. But it only made things worse. She resented Sarah for tying her here, and when she got pregnant again," his voice broke, "she told me she'd rather die than bring another child into this godforsaken place. And then she did die, both of them." Emma's heart ached for him. She took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "That wasn't your fault." "Wasn't it? I brought her here. I made her miserable." "No," Emma said firmly. "You gave her a choice. She chose to marry you. What happened after? Sometimes people aren't suited for each other. That doesn't make it anyone's fault." James turned to look at her, his dark eyes searching her face. "And you, Emma, do you think you're suited for this life?" Emma thought about her answer carefully. "I think I've been looking for this life without knowing it. I've been alone in a crowd for so long. Here, even with just you and Sarah, I feel less alone than I ever did in town." James cupped her face in his hands. "You're not like her. You're stronger, braver." "I'm not brave," Emma whispered. "I'm terrified half the time. Terrified you'll realize you made a mistake. Terrified Sarah will never really love me. Terrified I'm not good enough for this life you've built." "Ooh, you're already better than good enough," James said, and then he kissed her, soft and sweet, and Emma felt something shift between them. The next day, Emma woke to find the first snow of the season falling. It was early November, and the flakes came down soft and thick, transforming the farm into a wonderland. Sarah pressed her nose to the window, her breath fogging the glass. "Snow!" she exclaimed, the first real excitement Emma had heard in her voice. "Would you like to go play in it?" Emma asked. Sarah's eyes went wide. "Can we? Mama Catherine never liked the snow." Emma felt a pang at the comparison, but pushed it aside. "Well, I love snow. Let's bundle up and build a snowman." They spent the morning outside, Sarah shrieking with laughter as Emma showed her how to roll snow into balls, how to pack it tight, how to make snow angels. When James came in from the barn, he stopped dead at the sight of them. Emma was lying in the snow next to Sarah, both of them moving their arms and legs to create angel wings. Snow clung to their hair and eyelashes, and they were both laughing so hard they could barely breathe. "What are you two doing?" he asked, but he was smiling. "Making angels," Sarah called out. "Come make one with us, Papa." Emma watched as James hesitated, then slowly lowered himself into the snow beside them. His angel was enormous, dwarfing theirs, and Sarah giggled at the sight of her serious father lying in the snow. That night, after Sarah was asleep, James found Emma in the kitchen making hot cocoa. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For making her laugh. For being exactly what she needs. What we both need." Emma handed him a mug, their fingers brushing. "She's easy to love." "So are you," James said quietly, and the look in his eyes made Emma's heart race. Over the next few weeks, the temperature dropped and the snow piled higher. Emma learned to navigate the harsh Montana winter, to keep fires burning, to preserve food, to layer clothes against the bitter cold. She also learned the rhythms of the farm. She helped James feed the cattle, learned to milk the cow, gathered eggs from the hen house. Her hands, already rough from years of work, became even more calloused, but she didn't mind. These were honest calluses, earned building a life she loved. James watched her adapt with growing admiration. Where Catherine had wilted, Emma flourished. Where his first wife had complained, Emma found solutions. She was resourceful, determined, uncomplaining, and she was beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with conventional prettiness. The way she moved with efficient grace, the way she bit her lip when concentrating, the way she sang softly to Sarah while braiding the little girl's hair. James found himself watching her more and more, wanting her more and more. One particularly cold night, a blizzard struck. The wind howled around the house and snow piled against the windows. James went out to check on the livestock and came back nearly frozen, his lips blue, his hands numb. Emma took one look at him and sprang into action. She built up the fire, heated water, and helped him out of his frozen coat and boots. "You need to warm up," she said, her voice tight with worry. "Your hands are like ice." She wrapped his hands in warm cloths, then made him sit by the fire while she brought him hot soup. As the feeling returned to his fingers, the pain made him wince. "I'm sorry," Emma said, kneeling beside him. "I know it hurts." "It's not your fault," James said through gritted teeth. Emma took his hands in hers and began to massage them gently, trying to restore circulation. James watched her bent head, the concern on her face, and felt something break open in his chest. "Emma," he said hoarsely. She looked up, and whatever she saw in his face made her breath catch. They were so close, her kneeling between his knees, her hands still holding his. "I know I promised to give you time," James said. "I know I said I wouldn't push. But Emma, I need you to know this isn't just convenience for me anymore. I'm falling for you. Hard." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I'm falling for you too. I have been since the day you walked into that bakery." James pulled her up and into his lap, wrapping his arms around her. She fit perfectly against him, her head tucked under his chin. They sat like that for a long time, just holding each other, listening to the storm rage outside while they created their own warmth inside. "I don't want separate rooms anymore," Emma whispered. James pulled back to look at her. "Are you sure?" "I've never been more sure of anything." But before they could move, they heard a small voice from the stairs. "Papa, I'm scared of the storm." Sarah stood there in her nightgown, clutching her doll, her eyes wide with fear. Emma immediately stood and went to her. "Come here, sweetheart. The storm can't hurt us. We're safe and warm inside." She picked Sarah up and carried her to the sofa, settling the little girl between her and James. They wrapped a blanket around all three of them and sat together, a family, while the blizzard raged. Sarah fell asleep with her head on Emma's lap and her feet on James's leg. Emma stroked the child's hair and looked at James over her head. "This is what I want," she said softly. "This exact moment, forever." James reached across Sarah and took Emma's hand. "Then you'll have it. I promise." The storm lasted 3 days. They were snowed in completely, cut off from the outside world. But Emma didn't mind. She cooked meals, played games with Sarah, and spent the evenings talking with James about everything and nothing. She learned that he'd inherited the farm from his father, that he'd built most of the outbuildings himself, that he dreamed of expanding the herd and maybe buying the adjacent property someday. James learned that Emma had taught herself to read by candlelight after her mother died, that she'd always dreamed of having a garden, that she wanted a dozen children if God blessed them with that many. "A dozen?" James laughed. "You sure about that?" Emma blushed. "Well, maybe not a dozen, but a houseful. I was an only child, and it was so lonely." "Sarah would love brothers and sisters," James said, his eyes dark with promise. On the third night, after Sarah was asleep, Emma went to James's room. He was standing by the window, watching the snow finally stop falling. "The storm's past," he said, without turning around. "I know." Emma closed the door behind her. "James, I don't want to wait anymore," He turned to face her, and the hunger in his eyes made Emma's knees weak. "Emma, if we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine completely. I'll be yours completely. I want that," Emma said. "I want to be yours." James crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. Their kiss was different this time, deeper, more urgent, full of weeks of pent-up longing. "I'll be gentle," James murmured against her lips. "I know you've never. I'll take care of you." "I know you will," Emma whispered. "I trust you." James worked from dawn to dusk, but every evening he came home to a clean house and a hot meal. Emma noticed he'd started lingering after dinner, finding excuses to stay in the kitchen while she cleaned up, telling her about his day, asking about hers. One evening, about a month after Emma's arrival, she was in the library, curled up in a chair with one of the books James had mentioned. She heard footsteps and looked up to find him in the doorway. "I didn't mean to disturb you," he said. "You're not. Come in." He sat down across from her, looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Emma, I need to ask you something." Her heart skipped. "What is it? Are you happy here? I know this isn't what you probably dreamed of when you thought about marriage." "James," she interrupted, "I'm happier than I've been in years. This is the first time in my life I've felt like I belong somewhere." His shoulders relaxed. "Good. That's good, because I don't want you to feel trapped. If you ever want to leave, I don't want to leave." They looked at each other across the space between their chairs. The air felt heavy with something unspoken, but before James could continue, they heard a crash from upstairs, followed by Sarah's crying. Both jumped up and rushed to her room. Sarah was sitting in bed, surrounded by broken glass from the water pitcher that had fallen from her nightstand. She was crying, her small body shaking with sobs. "I'm sorry," she wailed. "I didn't mean to. I was reaching for water and I knocked it over." Emma quickly checked Sarah for cuts while James cleaned up the glass. "Shh, sweetheart, it's all right. Accidents happen. Are you hurt?" Sarah shook her head, but she was still crying. "Mama Catherine used to get so angry when I broke things. She said I was clumsy and careless." Emma's heart broke at the fear in the little girl's voice. She gathered Sarah into her arms, holding her tight. "I'm not angry, baby. Not even a little bit. It was an accident. Glass can be replaced. You can't." "Really?" Sarah asked in a small voice. "You're not mad." "Not at all," Emma assured her. She looked up at James, who was watching them with an expression she couldn't quite read. "How about I stay with you until you fall back asleep?" Sarah nodded eagerly, and Emma climbed into the small bed with her, holding her close. She sang softly, an old lullaby her own mother had sung to her, and gradually Sarah's breathing evened out into sleep. When Emma finally crept out of the room, she found James waiting in the hallway. Without a word, he took her hand and led her back to the library. "What you did back there," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "The way you handled Sarah, the way you held her and made her feel safe. Emma, do you know how long it's been since I've seen her feel safe like that?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. "She's such a sweet child, James. She just needs love and patience." "She needs you," James said, "and so do I." He crossed to her then, and this time there was no hesitation. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her with a hunger that made Emma's knees weak. She melted against him, her hands fisting in his shirt. "I've been trying to be patient," James murmured against her lips, "trying to give you space. But Emma, I can't stop thinking about you. You're in my head every minute of every day." "I think about you too," Emma confessed, her cheeks burning. "When you're out in the fields, when you come in for meals, when we sit together in the evenings. I can't help wondering what it would be like if this marriage was real in every way." James pulled back to look at her, his dark eyes intense. "It is real, Emma, every part of it except one, and that one part, I want it more than I've ever wanted anything. But only if you want it too, only if you're ready." Emma's heart was pounding so hard she could barely breathe. "I'm ready, James. I've been ready for weeks. I just didn't know if I what? Wanted you." James laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Emma, I want you so much I can barely think straight. But I made you a promise. I told you I wouldn't push, wouldn't expect." Emma put her finger to his lips, silencing him. "I release you from that promise. I want to be your wife in every way. I want to belong to you completely." The look in James's eyes made Emma shiver with anticipation, but then he shook his head. "Not tonight, not when you're tired from taking care of Sarah. When we come together, I want you rested and sure and ready for me to take my time with you." Emma felt a rush of warmth at his words. "When then?" "Soon. James promised. Very soon. But first, there's something I want to tell you. He took both her hands in his. Sarah asked me today when she could call you Mama, James said quietly. Emma's eyes widened. What did you tell her? I said she could ask you herself. I'd be honored, Emma whispered, if she wants to. James stood up and crossed to her chair. He knelt beside it, bringing his face level with hers. This close, Emma could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from his body. Emma, this marriage, it doesn't have to stay a marriage of convenience. If you felt the same way I'm starting to feel. How do you feel? Emma asked, her voice barely audible. Like I haven't felt since my wife died. Like I'm waking up after a long sleep. Like maybe I could be happy again. He reached up and touched her face, his rough fingers gentle against her skin. Like I'm falling for my own wife. Emma leaned into his touch. I feel it too. I have for weeks. I just didn't know if you... I didn't want to push you. I didn't want you to feel obligated. But Emma, you've brought life back into this house. Into me. Sarah laughs now. Did you know that? I hadn't heard her laugh since her mother died, but yesterday I heard her giggling with you in the garden. Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. I love her. I love this place, and I'm falling in love with you. James pulled her from the chair and into his arms. She fit against him perfectly, her head tucked under his chin. His heart thundered beneath her ear. I need to know this is real, he murmured into her hair. I need to know you're not just grateful for the security. I need to know you want me, not just the life I can give you. Emma pulled back enough to look up at him. James Thornton, I wanted you the moment you walked into that bakery and saw me as more than just a tired, poor woman. I wanted you when you paid my debts without expecting anything in return. I wanted you when I saw how gentle you are with Sarah, despite your size and strength. I want you now, and I'll want you tomorrow, and the day after that. He bent his head, and their lips met in a kiss that was tender and hungry all at once. Emma's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer, and James groaned low in his throat. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. My room or yours? James asked, his voice rough with desire. Emma blushed. Yours. It's bigger. He swept her up into his arms, making her squeal with surprise. James, put me down. Never, he said, carrying her toward the stairs. I've been wanting to do this since the day we met. You're so small, so delicate. I could carry you everywhere. I'm not delicate, Emma protested, but she was laughing. I'm strong, remember? You're both, James said, kicking open his bedroom door. Strong and delicate, tough and tender. You're everything, Emma. He set her down gently on his bed and looked at her with such intensity that Emma shivered. Are you sure? He asked. We can wait. I don't want to rush you. Emma reached up and pulled him down to her. I've been waiting my whole life for someone to look at me the way you do. I don't want to wait another minute. James captured her lips again, and this kiss was different, deeper, more possessive. His large hands moved to the buttons of her dress, and Emma felt her heart racing. I've never, she whispered against his lips. I know, James murmured. I'll be gentle. I promise I'll be so gentle with you, Emma. I'm going to take care of you. He undressed her slowly, reverently, his rough hands surprisingly gentle on her skin. Each piece of clothing he removed, he followed with kisses, making Emma gasp and tremble. You're beautiful, he breathed, his eyes dark with desire as he looked at her. So beautiful it hurts to look at you. I'm not, Emma started, but James silenced her with a kiss. You are. To me, you're the most beautiful woman in the world. These hands, he kissed her palms, that have worked so hard. These arms that hold Sarah with such love. This body that's going to give me children. Every part of you is precious to me. Tears slipped down Emma's cheeks at his words. No one had ever spoken to her like this, with such tenderness and reverence. James undressed himself, and Emma's breath caught at the sight of him. He was magnificent, all muscle and strength, his body hardened by years of physical labor, but his touch remained gentle as he joined her on the bed. If anything hurts, or if you want me to stop, you tell me, James said, his voice strained with the effort of holding back. I need you to promise me, Emma. I promise, she whispered. What followed was a revelation for Emma. James kept his word, going slowly, whispering words of love and encouragement, making sure she felt nothing but pleasure. There was a moment of discomfort as he claimed her completely, but James held her close, kissing away her tears, giving her time to adjust. That's it, he murmured. You're doing so well, sweetheart. You feel so perfect, like you were made for me. As they moved together, Emma felt something shift deep inside her. This wasn't just physical. It was a joining of souls, a completion she hadn't known she'd been missing. She clung to James, lost in the sensations, in the feeling of being cherished and desired and loved. When release finally came, they found it together, crying out in unison, holding each other as if they'd never let go. Afterwards, they lay tangled together, Emma's head on his chest, his arms wrapped around her. James's hand stroked her hair with infinite gentleness. "Did I hurt you?" he asked, concern in his voice. "No," Emma said honestly. "Well, maybe a little at first, but then, James, I had no idea it could be like that." He kissed the top of her head. "It's like that because I love you, because you love me. It's not just bodies coming together, Emma. It's souls." Emma tilted her head up to look at him. "Make love to me again." James's eyes darkened with renewed desire. "Are you sure? I don't want you to be sore." "I'm sure," Emma said, and this time she was the one who initiated the kiss. The second time was different, slower, deeper. James took his time exploring every inch of her, learning what made her gasp, what made her moan, what made her cry out his name. And Emma explored him in return, marveling at the contrast between his hard muscles and his gentle touch. They made love through the night, finally falling asleep as dawn began to break, utterly exhausted and completely satisfied. The next morning, Emma woke to find Sarah standing beside the bed, staring at her and James with wide eyes. Emma's face flamed red as she realized the little girl had found her in her father's room, and she and James were very obviously naked beneath the sheets. "Mama," Sarah said, and the word had never sounded sweeter. "Are you going to stay in Papa's room now?" Emma looked at James, who was trying not to laugh despite his own embarrassment. "Yes, sweetheart, if that's all right with you." Sarah's face lit up with the biggest smile Emma had seen from her. "Does that mean you're my real mama now? Forever and ever?" Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. "Yes, baby, forever and ever." Sarah launched herself onto the bed, and James quickly made sure the covers stayed in place as their daughter burrowed between them. "I'm glad. I prayed every night for a new mama, and God sent me you." James caught Emma's eye over their daughter's head, his expression soft with love. Emma knew that whatever hardship she'd endured, whatever struggles she'd faced, they'd all been worth it to arrive at this moment, wrapped in the arms of her family, in a home filled with love. The days that followed were blissful. Emma moved her belongings into James's room, and every night they fell asleep in each other's arms. Their physical intimacy only deepened their emotional connection. James couldn't seem to get enough of her, reaching for her hand while they worked, stealing kisses when Sarah wasn't looking, making love to her every night with a passion that never seemed to fade. Emma bloomed under his attention. She'd never felt so beautiful, so desired, so loved. The exhausted, invisible woman who'd scrubbed floors in Silver Creek seemed like a distant memory. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after that first night together, Emma was in the garden when she heard voices from the road. She looked up to see a fancy carriage approaching, much fancier than anything the local farmers drove. A distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit stepped out, followed by a woman in an elaborate dress. They looked completely out of place on the rugged Montana farm. "Can I help you?" Emma asked, wiping her dirty hands on her apron. The man looked at her with barely concealed disdain. "We're looking for James Thornton. Is he available?" "He's in the north pasture. May I ask what this is about?" The woman spoke up, her voice cold. "We're Catherine's parents. We've come to see our granddaughter." Emma's heart sank. Catherine's parents, the ones who'd never once visited after their daughter died, who'd never sent word or help or support. And now they showed up unannounced. "I'll fetch James," Emma said. "Please wait here." She found James mending fence and quickly explained the situation. His face went hard. "They have some nerve showing up after 2 years." "What do they want?" Emma asked. "Nothing good, I'm sure." He put down his tools. "Come with me. I want them to see that Sarah has a mother now." The confrontation that followed was tense. Catherine's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Wallace, made it clear they'd come to take Sarah back to Boston with them. "She needs to be raised properly," Mrs. Wallace said. Her nose wrinkled as she looked around the farm. "In society, with culture and refinement. Not out here in this wilderness." "Sarah is my daughter," James said, his voice dangerously quiet, "and she's staying here with me and my wife." Mr. Wallace's eyes narrowed. "Wife? You remarried? Already?" Catherine's barely been gone 2 years. Catherine died and left me alone with a grieving child, James said. I did what I had to do to give Sarah a mother. You mean you found some local girl willing to play house in exchange for security? Mrs. Wallace sneered, looking at Emma. How much did he pay you, dear? Or was the promise of 3 meals a day enough? Emma felt her cheeks burn, but she held her ground. James didn't pay me anything. I married him because I love him and his daughter. Love, Mrs. Wallace scoffed. How touching. But that doesn't change the fact that our granddaughter deserves better than this. Better than being loved, Emma asked quietly. Better than having a father who adores her? Better than a home filled with warmth and laughter? Better than a mail-order bride stepmother and a farmer father? Mr. Wallace said bluntly. We can give Sarah everything. The best schools, the best society, the best opportunities. What can you give her? Hard work and isolation. James's hands clenched into fists. But before he could speak, a small voice came from behind them. I don't want to go to Boston. They all turned to see Sarah standing in the doorway. Tears were streaming down her face. I want to stay here with Papa and Mama Emma. This is my home. You never came when I was sad. You never wrote letters. You didn't love me. But Mama Emma loves me. She makes me laugh and teaches me things and holds me when I'm scared. I don't want to go with you. Sarah ran to Emma, who immediately scooped her up and held her tight. James moved to stand beside them, his arm around both his girls. You heard my daughter, James said. She's staying here. This is her home. We're her family. The Wallaces tried to argue, even threatened legal action, but eventually they left, their carriage disappearing in a cloud of dust. That night, after Sarah was asleep, Emma and James lay in bed processing what had happened. Do you think they'll really try to take her? Emma asked, fear in her voice. They can try, James said grimly, but they won't succeed. Sarah belongs with us. James, what if they're right? What if I'm not good enough for her? I'm not educated or refined or... James rolled over to face her, his expression fierce. Stop! You're everything Sarah needs. Everything I need. Don't let those bitter, cold people make you doubt yourself. I'm just a poor girl from Silver Creek who scrubbed floors for a living. You're my wife, James said firmly. You're Sarah's mother. You're the strongest, bravest, most loving woman I know. And if the Wallaces can't see that, then they're fools. He kissed her then, deep and possessive, as if reassuring himself that she was really his. Emma kissed him back just as fiercely, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. They made love that night, with an almost desperate intensity, as if affirming their bond, their family, their right to be together. The next few weeks were tense, as they waited to see if the Wallaces would make good on their threats. But no lawyers came. No legal papers arrived. Gradually, they began to relax, to believe that the crisis had passed. It was during this time that Emma began to notice changes in her body. Her monthly courses hadn't come, and she felt tired and slightly nauseous in the mornings. Mama, Sarah said, the first word Emma had heard her speak in weeks. Are you going to stay in Papa's room now? Emma looked at James, who was trying not to laugh. Yes, sweetheart, if that's all right with you. Sarah's face lit up with the biggest smile Emma had seen from her. Does that mean you're my real mama now? Forever and ever? Emma felt tears spring to her eyes. Yes, baby. Forever and ever. Sarah launched herself onto the bed, burrowing between Emma and James. I'm glad. I prayed every night for a new mama, and God sent me you. James caught Emma's eye over their daughter's head, his expression soft with love. Emma knew that whatever hardship she'd endured, whatever struggles she'd faced, they'd all been worth it to arrive at this moment, wrapped in the arms of her family, in a home filled with love. 3 months later, Emma stood in the kitchen, her hands resting on her still flat stomach. Dr. Wilson had confirmed what she'd suspected. She was pregnant. She'd been working day and night for so long that she'd missed the signs at first. But now there was no doubt. Those 3 months had transformed everything. Emma had truly become Mrs. Thornton in every sense of the word. She and James had settled into a deep, passionate love that grew stronger every day. The farm had transformed too. Emma's garden, dormant under winter snow, was now showing signs of spring. Green shoots pushed through the dark earth, promising vegetables and flowers. The chicken coop James had repaired was full of laying hens. The house gleamed with Emma's care and attention. But the biggest transformation was in Sarah. The quiet, withdrawn little girl had blossomed into a chattering, giggling child who followed Emma everywhere and called her Mama without hesitation. Just this morning, Sarah had brought Emma a handful of wildflowers she'd picked from the edge of the property. "These are for you, Mama," she'd said, "because you make everything beautiful." Emma had cried at that, overcome with love for this child who'd captured her heart so completely. Now, as she waited for James to come in from mending fences, Emma thought about how to tell him about the baby. She wanted it to be special, memorable. She heard his boots on the porch and quickly checked her reflection in the small mirror by the door. Her cheeks were pink with excitement, her eyes bright. She looked happy. She looked loved. James came through the door, and as always, his face transformed when he saw her. The stern, guarded expression he wore for the world melted into tenderness. "Hello, beautiful," he said, pulling her into his arms despite his dirty clothes. "How was your day?" Emma took a deep breath. This was it. "James, I need to tell you something." He pulled back immediately, concern flickering across his face. "What's wrong? Are you all right?" "I'm more than all right." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." For a moment, James just stared at her, his hand motionless on her belly. Then his eyes filled with tears, and he dropped to his knees right there in the kitchen, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing his face to her stomach. "Emma," he choked out, "are you sure? You're really sure?" "The doctor confirmed it this morning when he came by to check on the Hendersons. I'm about 3 months along." James looked up at her, tears streaming down his face. "I never thought, after what happened with Catherine, I was afraid to hope for this again." Emma ran her fingers through his hair, her own tears falling. "This isn't like before, James. I'm strong, I'm healthy, and I want this baby more than anything." He stood and kissed her deeply, tasting the salt of their mingled tears. "Thank you," he whispered against her lips. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this, for not giving up on me. On Sarah, on this life." "I could never give up on you," Emma said. "You're my home, James. You and Sarah, and now this little one." She placed her hand over his on her stomach. "We're a family." That evening, they told Sarah together. The little girl was playing with her doll on the parlor floor when Emma and James sat down on either side of her. "Sarah, sweetheart, we have something exciting to tell you," Emma began. Sarah looked up, curious. "What is it?" "You're going to be a big sister," James said, smiling. "Mama Emma is going to have a baby." Sarah's eyes went wide as saucers. Then she squealed with delight and threw her arms around Emma's neck. "A baby, a real baby, for me to play with." Emma laughed, hugging her tight. "Yes, a real baby, but you'll have to be very gentle. Babies are fragile." "I'll be so gentle," Sarah promised solemnly. "I'll be the best big sister ever. Can I help take care of it? Can I hold it? When will it come?" "Not for a few more months," James said, ruffling her hair. "The baby needs time to grow big and strong, just like you did." Sarah placed her small hand on Emma's belly, her face serious and wondering. "Is it a boy or a girl?" "We won't know until the baby is born," Emma said. "What would you like?" Sarah thought about this carefully. I think I'd like a sister, so I can teach her things, like you teach me things, Mama." Emma felt her heart squeeze with love. "Boy or girl, they'll be very lucky to have you as a big sister." That night, Sarah insisted on sleeping in their room so she could be close to the baby. James carried her sleeping form back to her own bed around midnight, then returned to find Emma sitting up, her hand on her stomach, a thoughtful expression on her face. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, climbing into bed beside her. "How different everything is now from 6 months ago. If someone had told me then that I'd be here, married to a wonderful man, with a daughter I love and a baby on the way, I wouldn't have believed it." James pulled her close, his hand joining hers on her belly. "I wouldn't have believed it either. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life alone, just me and Sarah, doing my best and failing at being both mother and father to her." "You never failed her," Emma said firmly. "You loved her and protected her and gave her everything you could. That's not failure. But I couldn't give her what you've given her. Joy, laughter, a mother's love." Emma turned to face him in the darkness. "And you've given me what no one else ever could. A home, a family, a place to belong. We saved each other, James. That's what love does." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Emma Thornton. more than I ever thought I could love anyone." "I love you too," Emma whispered. The next few months passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Emma's belly grew round with the baby, and James became impossibly protective. He wouldn't let her lift anything heavy, insisted she rest every afternoon, and worried constantly about her health. "I'm not made of glass," Emma protested one day when he tried to take a basket of vegetables from her. "Women have been having babies since the beginning of time." "Not my woman," James said stubbornly. "Not without me making sure she's safe." Emma couldn't really complain about being cherished, though, and in truth, as her pregnancy progressed, she did get tired more easily. Her back ached, her feet swelled, and some mornings the nausea was overwhelming. But through it all, James was there. He rubbed her aching feet at night. He held her hair when morning sickness struck. He brought her tea and crackers in bed. He was tender and patient and devoted. Sarah was equally attentive. She helped with chores without being asked, brought Emma pillows and blankets, and talked to the baby through Emma's belly. "Hello, baby," she would say, her lips close to Emma's stomach. "This is your big sister, Sarah. I'm going to love you so much. I'm learning to braid hair so I can fix yours when you get big enough. Mama is teaching me." One afternoon in late summer, Emma was resting on the porch when she felt the baby move for the first time. It was just a flutter like butterfly wings, but it took her breath away. "James!" she called out. "James, come quick!" He came running from the barn, his face pale with worry. "What's wrong? Is it the baby?" "Feel," Emma said, taking his hand and placing it on her belly. "Wait, there, did you feel it?" James's eyes went wide with wonder. "The baby's moving." "Our baby is saying hello," Emma said, tears streaming down her face. They sat together on the porch, James's hand on Emma's belly, waiting for the next flutter of movement. When it came, he laughed with pure joy. "That's our child," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "growing inside you. Emma, you're carrying our future." "Our future," Emma repeated, loving the sound of it. The baby became more active as the weeks passed. Sometimes, late at night, Emma would wake to feel the baby kicking and turning. James would wake too, keeping his hand on her belly, talking softly to their unborn child. "I can't wait to meet you," he'd murmur. "Your mama and your big sister and I, we're all waiting for you. You're going to be so loved, little one, so very loved." Dim. As Emma's due date approached, James became even more anxious. He made sure the midwife, Mrs. Patterson, knew exactly when to come. He prepared Emma's room with extra blankets and supplies. He even built a beautiful cradle from oak wood, sanding it smooth so there were no rough edges. Emma would find him sometimes late at night, sitting beside the cradle, running his hand over the wood he'd crafted. "It's beautiful," she told him one night. He looked up, startled. "I didn't hear you come in. You should be resting." "I wanted to see what you were working on." She sat down beside him with some difficulty, her belly making movement awkward now. "James, you're going to be a wonderful father to this baby." "I hope so," he said quietly. "I failed Catherine. I let her die." "No," Emma said firmly. "You didn't fail anyone. What happened to Catherine was a tragedy. But it wasn't your fault. And I'm not Catherine. I'm strong, James. I'm healthy. This baby and I are going to be fine." He pulled her close as her belly would allow. "I can't lose you, Emma. You and Sarah and this baby. You're my whole world. If something happened to you, nothing is going to happen to me," Emma said. "I promise. I'm going to give you a healthy baby, and then I'm going to give you several more after that. And we're going to grow old together on this farm, surrounded by our children and grandchildren." James laughed despite his tears. "Several more? How many is several?" "As many as God sees fit to bless us with," Emma said. "I told you I wanted a houseful." She heard his footsteps on the porch and went to meet him. He was dusty from a day in the fields, but his face lit up when he saw her. "Hello, beautiful," he said, pulling her into his arms despite his dirty clothes. "How was your day?" "James," she said, taking his hand and placing it on her stomach. "We're going to have a baby." His eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Emma, are you sure? The doctor confirmed it this morning." James dropped to his knees, wrapping his arms around her waist and pressing his face to her stomach. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this." Emma ran her fingers through his hair. "Thank you for finding me, for seeing me when no one else did." He stood and kissed her deeply. "I'll always see you, Emma. You're the light of my life." And that evening, they told Sarah she was going to be a big sister, The little girl's excitement was boundless, and she insisted on sleeping between them that night so she could be close to the baby. As Emma lay in bed, surrounded by her family, she thought about the woman she'd been just a few months ago, exhausted, hopeless, invisible. She'd worked day and night just to get by, never imagining that life could be anything more than endless struggle. But then a wealthy farmer had made her an offer that changed everything. Not just the offer of marriage or security or a home. He'd offered her something much more precious, the chance to be seen, to be loved, to belong. And Emma had taken that chance, transforming it into a life more beautiful than she'd ever dared to dream. The baby came on a warm September evening, just as the sun was setting over the Montana mountains. Emma had been feeling contractions all day, but she'd insisted on making dinner for James and Sarah first, wanting everything to be normal for as long as possible. "Emma, you need to rest," James had said, watching her move around the kitchen with concern. "Let me take care of things." "I'm fine," Emma had insisted, but then a sharp pain made her gasp and grip the counter. James was beside her in an instant. "That's it. I'm sending for Mrs. Patterson. Sarah, go fetch your grandmother Fletcher." And despite their initial hostility, Mrs. Fletcher had softened toward Emma over the months, impressed by how the young woman had transformed the farm and brought joy back to James and Sarah. She arrived quickly, took one look at Emma, and immediately began preparing. The labor was long and difficult. Emma had thought she knew what hard work was, but nothing compared to the effort of bringing a child into the world. James stayed by her side the entire time, holding her hand, wiping her forehead, whispering words of encouragement. "You can do this," he murmured. "You're the strongest woman I know. Just a little longer, my love." When the baby finally came, filling the room with lusty cries, Emma collapsed back against the pillows, exhausted but triumphant. "It's a boy," Mrs. Patterson announced, placing the squirming, red-faced infant on Emma's chest. "A healthy, beautiful boy." Emma looked down at her son through tears of joy. He was perfect, tiny but strong, with a full head of dark hair like his father and lungs that worked very well indeed. James leaned over them both, his own face wet with tears. "He's beautiful, Emma. He's absolutely perfect." "What should we name him?" Emma asked. James thought for a moment, then said, "Thomas, after your father. Thomas James Thornton." Emma's heart overflowed with love. "That's perfect." Sarah was allowed in shortly after, and she approached the bed with wide, wondering eyes. "Is that my brother?" she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart. Come meet Thomas." Sarah gently touched the baby's tiny hand, and Thomas immediately grasped her finger with surprising strength. Sarah gasped with delight. "He's holding me. Papa, Mama, he's holding my hand." "He knows you're his big sister," Emma said. "He knows he can count on you to protect him." Sarah beamed with pride and responsibility. "I'll always protect him, always." The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and constant feedings, but Emma had never been happier. James was a devoted father, changing diapers without complaint, walking the floor with Thomas when he cried, marveling at every tiny milestone. One night Emma woke to find James's side of the bed empty. She heard soft voices from the nursery and padded down the hall to find James sitting in the rocking chair with Thomas in his arms. "You're going to love it here, son," James was saying quietly. "Your mama has made this house a home. Your sister is going to spoil you rotten, and I'm going to teach you everything I know, how to work the land, how to respect it, how to be a good man." Emma leaned against the doorframe, her heart full. This was the man people in town had warned her about, the cold, remote widower who'd let his first wife die. But Emma knew the truth. James wasn't cold. He was careful with his heart because he'd been hurt so badly, and she'd been honored to be the one to help him heal. "And most importantly," James continued, "I'm going to teach you to treat women with respect, to see them as equals, to love them the way I love your mother, completely, devotedly, forever." Emma stepped into the room then, and James looked up with a soft smile. "Did we wake you?" "No, I just missed you." She sat on the ottoman beside his chair. "What were you two talking about?" "I was telling our son about his future, about how lucky he is to have you as his mother." "We're all lucky," Emma said, reaching out to stroke Thomas's soft cheek. I'm the luckiest of all. The months turned into a year, and then 2. The farm prospered under James's hard work and Emma's careful management. The garden she'd planted had become legendary in the county, and she sold vegetables and preserves at the market in town, bringing in extra income. Thomas grew from a tiny infant into a sturdy toddler who followed his father everywhere, while Sarah blossomed into a confident young girl who helped Emma with everything from cooking to teaching Thomas his letters. They had challenges, of course. There were harsh winters and failed crops, illnesses and injuries, the constant worry that comes with farm life, but they faced everything together, as a family. 2 years after Thomas was born, Emma gave birth to twin girls, Grace and Hope. James had laughed through his tears when Mrs. Patterson announced it was twins. A houseful, he'd said, remembering Emma's words from years ago. You said you wanted a houseful, and I meant it, Emma had replied, exhausted but glowing with happiness as she held her daughters. Sarah, now 7, was an excellent helper with the babies. She could change diapers, warm bottles, and rock crying infants with the competence of someone much older. Thomas, at 2, was fascinated by his little sisters and would bring them his favorite toys. One spring evening, 5 years after Emma had first walked into that bakery and met James, she stood on the porch watching her family. James was teaching Thomas how to feed the chickens, while Sarah chased the twins around the yard, their laughter filling the air. Mrs. Henderson from Silver Creek had come to visit the week before and had hardly recognized Emma. You look 10 years younger, she'd marveled, and so happy. I knew that man was the right one for you the moment I saw him in town asking about you. You knew about James? Emma had asked in surprise. Of course. He came to town several times watching you work, asking questions about your character. He was very careful in choosing a wife and mother for his daughter. I told him you were the best person I knew, and I'm glad he listened. Now, watching her family in the golden evening light, Emma thought about how different her life could have been. She could still be in Silver Creek, scrubbing floors, slowly working herself to death, alone and invisible. Instead, she had this. A home, a family, love beyond measure. James came up the porch steps, Thomas riding on his shoulders, both of them grinning. What are you thinking about? He asked. Just counting my blessings, Emma said. James set Thomas down, and the boy immediately ran off to play with his sisters. James wrapped his arms around Emma from behind, resting his chin on her head. I'm the one who's blessed, he murmured. Every single day, I thank God for sending you to me. We found each other, Emma corrected, and we built this life together. Speaking of building, James said, and she could hear the smile in his voice. I was thinking this house is getting a bit crowded with 4 children. Emma laughed. Are you suggesting we need to add on? I'm suggesting we need a bigger house. I've been drawing up plans. What would you think of a proper farmhouse? Big kitchen, more bedrooms, maybe even a room just for you, a sewing room or a place for your preserves. Emma turned in his arms to face him. James, that would cost so much money. We have the money, James said. The farm is doing well, thanks to your hard work as much as mine, and I want you to have everything. You deserve everything. Emma reached up to cup his face. I already have everything, but a bigger kitchen would be nice, especially if we're going to have more children. James's eyes widened. Emma, are you saying? She smiled. I'm saying that the twins are almost 2, and I've always wanted a big family. What do you think? Should we aim for that dozen? James laughed and spun her around right there on the porch. I think you're incredible. I think I'm the luckiest man alive. And yes, let's fill this new house with as many children as we can love. That night, after the children were all asleep, Emma and James lay in bed talking about the future. They planned the new house, discussed expanding the farm, dreamed about their children's futures. Sarah wants to be a teacher, James said. She told me yesterday she wants to open a school right here on the property so farm children can get an education without having to travel to town. That's wonderful, Emma said. We'll make it happen. Whatever our children want to be, whatever they want to do, we'll support them. Even if Thomas wants to be something other than a farmer, even then, Emma confirmed. Though I suspect he'll love this land as much as you do. James pulled her closer. I never thought I'd have this again. After Catherine died, I thought my life was over. I was just going through the motions, trying to survive for Sarah's sake. And now I'm living, really living. You brought me back to life, Emma. You and our children, you're my reason for everything." Emma kissed him softly. "You did the same for me. Before you, I was just surviving too, working myself to death, invisible to everyone. But you saw me, you chose me, you loved me. I'll always love you," James whispered, "until my last breath and beyond." The years continued to pass, each one bringing new joys and challenges. They built the new house just as they'd planned, and it filled quickly with laughter and love. Emma had her 6th child at 30, a boy they named Daniel, and her 7th, another girl called Faith, at 32. 7 children, ranging from Sarah at 12 to baby Faith, kept the household bustling with activity. But Emma thrived on it. She'd found her calling as a mother and wife, and she approached it with the same determination she'd once applied to scrubbing floors and kneading bread. The farm became known throughout Montana as one of the most successful in the territory. But more than that, the Thornton home became known as a place of warmth and welcome. Emma always had room at her table for one more, whether it was a traveling preacher, a neighbor in need, or a new family just arrived in the territory. On their 10th anniversary, James surprised Emma with a trip back to Silver Creek. She hadn't been back since the day they'd married, and as the town came into view, Emma felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. They visited Mrs. Henderson first, who cried with joy at seeing Emma so happy and prosperous. Then they walked past the boarding house where Emma had once lived, the bakery where she'd worked, all the places that had been her whole world. "Do you ever regret it?" James asked as they stood outside the old boarding house. "Leaving this all behind? You knew this town, these people. The farm was completely unknown to you." Emma looked at the rundown building where she'd been so miserable, then at her husband, this strong, gentle man who'd given her everything. She thought of their children waiting at home, of the life they'd built together. "Not for a single moment," she said firmly. "This town was never my home. You are my home, James. You and our children. Wherever you are, that's where I belong." James kissed her there on the street, not caring who saw. "I love you, Emma Thornton. Thank you for taking a chance on a lonely farmer with a sad little girl. Thank you for seeing me when I was invisible," Emma replied, "for valuing my strength instead of my prettiness, for making me feel like I mattered." "You've always mattered," James said. "From the very first moment I saw you in that bakery, flour on your face, exhaustion in your eyes, but still working harder than anyone I'd ever seen. I knew you were special. I knew you were the one." They returned to the farm as the sun was setting, and their children ran out to greet them, all talking at once about everything that had happened while they were gone. Emma scooped up Faith, kissed Thomas and Daniel, hugged the twins, and smiled at Sarah, who at 14 was becoming a beautiful young woman. Outside, the Montana stars shone bright over the farm that was now her home. Inside, wrapped in James's arms, with Sarah curled against her and new life growing within her, Emma Crawford Thornton finally understood what it meant to be truly rich. She had love. She had family. She had a future, and that was worth more than all the gold in the West.